Wait, who are you nasty people in my swamp? Oh wait. Oh, it's you guys again, it's the Pokemon people. Well, welcome back to a brand new video. I thought today in particular, at some of the brand new ancestral forms of Pokemon we could expect to see in Pokemon Legends Arceus, right? So this game is really hyped up, and personally, the idea of there being specifically the inclusion of some brand new forms, or evolutions, or pre-evolutions, or any of that, actually makes a lot of sense, and I've explained this before, but basically, this game could include Pokemon that will never show up again in the future, and it also makes sense from a business decision, so I thought we'd take a look at some of these in this video. We've already done a part 1 if you want to go check that out first. If not, let's get started.
The Ancestral Magnemite, with its electric and rock typing, is the early original of the Magnemite we know of today. This creature lived in the Sinnoh region, and evidence shows they hopped along the ground rather than floating through the air like the predecessors of theirs did, which is kind of odd when you think about it. Like, just imagine a freaking Magnemite just scooting around on the ground. I know, kind of would look a bit goofy, I would say, but either way. Also, these guys in particular would actually non-stop emit a weak electromagnetic wave, or rather waves, with this design by Goompy being based on specifically lodestone, which is a naturally magnetized piece of mineral magnetite, which basically is like natural magnets. So yeah, it's kind of a cool concept, with its evolution Magneton being a form that decided that together they have enough energy to actually levitate for short periods of time rather than actually having to non-stop, scuttle around on the ground. However, these guys still prefer to walk on the solid ground, as it made sense more to them. And if you look at their, I guess, hands, or I don't know, I mean, they kind of look like feet, I guess, like that's what they most look like. It would make sense that they would make their way around on ground rather than floating around, and these guys also retain the lodestone design. However, Ancestral Magneton, though, on the other hand, is the lost evolution of the Magneton we know of today. So today, only their stone bodies remain, which are scattered around the world as ancient monuments. This one being based on the Ishi no Hoden, an ancient monument in Japan, a monument that actually nobody knows the origin of and who actually made it. This mysteriously immense power allowed this being basically to have these massively heavy bodies to levitate indefinitely compared to its pre-evolution. Also, the artist Goompy adds that it was the subject of many ancient alien conspiracies, but yeah, none of those were scientifically proven. The ancestral unknowns did not go the route of seemingly the other unknowns. This psychic Pokemon was found in a newly unearthed chamber in the Solace Ruins, which depicts this strange figure. No other records of this Pokemon are known to exist, and it seems to show the unknowns are basically uniting together into a coherent form rather than individual pieces that look like letters. Goompy adds that it needs further research and might have a connection to Sigilith, and for its design part, it kind of uses Arceus and other mythology. Specifically, this eye design here was included as part of its design concept, and what Goompy kind of used when creating it.
Okay, before we continue, so Baby Yoda's been telling me you guys are not subscribed. I mean, like 75 to 80% of you guys haven't even subbed yet. Like, what are you doing? You guys really should sub. I mean, Baby Yoda, don't you agree?
Somebody touch my spaghetti!
Okay, I did not expect that from him, but it is what it is. You heard him. You should really subscribe. Like, I'm just saying.
And Origin Arceus, or, Ancient Arceus, whatever you want to call it, this one is more of a fun one, I'd rather say, because it's basically inspired by the beta sprite version of Arceus from basically the old versions of Diamond and Pearl, the unfinished versions during their development. Now, in the deepest chambers of the Solaceon Ruins lies a stone slab with this figure carved onto it. It is basically depicted alongside swarms of Unown, though nothing explains why this is the case. No other records exist about it, and I'm gonna be honest, I love this one. The idea of having a beta form of a Pokemon return in some way or shape would be amazing. However, we have actually seen proof that this could happen, and Arceus does technically already have a form, its final form, which we have seen, but I do think it's a cool addition added by Goompy art in particular. And when we talk about specifically the beta forms, right, I want to include that in future games, this actually is a proven possibility we might get these. You might wonder how. Well, with none else than our boy Sirfetch'd. See, the idea of Sirfetch'd was actually developed back in Pokemon's second generation, with Pokemon Gold and Silver games, of course. See, there was a concept for a Farfetch'd evolution, but it never actually was included, so there's always a possibility old IDs could return, and in this first leak for Pokemon Legends Arceus, we did see an image of what looks to be seemingly like a Farfetch'd or Sirfetch'd style of Pokemon, but it's a boss style to it, like it looks like a boss Pokemon made out of flames and stuff, which is nothing like anything we've ever seen before. Slowking is also the noble Pokemon, and another like lost evolution, I'd argue, that would be really cool in Pokemon Legends Arceus. See, specifically with Slowking, it is essentially a more like, I guess, primal version of what, like, you know, I guess the evolution of Slowpoke would look like back in the day, right? Like, it was more primal with these markings on it and just looking a little bit thinner as well. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't have that beer belly that you normally see, so that's something. But overall, I think a design like this would be really sick. Wobbuffet, which is the impatient Pokemon and also the lost evolution of specifically Wynaut. So yeah, this would be essentially a Pokemon that would have existed today, but unfortunately, well, somewhat unfortunately, its actual evolutionary path kind of changed and we got Wobbuffet instead. So Wobbuffet would be roaming the Sinnoh region as well. These things would be just kind of goofy, if anything, and also this is an impatient Pokemon, so it's different from Wobbuffet in some sense, right? Like, it is not a lazy sort of Pokemon like I'd argue Wobbuffet somewhat is, and this one's far more agile, and it was just roaming around the Sinnoh region. Also, shout out to Mahoy region for creating this design. Poliwrath, the Zen Pokemon. With this Pokemon, you will specifically find it actually meditating in areas, well, areas where you wouldn't expect normally to find this, you know, sort of Pokemon. But this thing meditates everywhere, but it prefers to meditate under a waterfall, where it feels like it can kind of reach its true Zen. And yeah, that's what this would be, a water psychic type Pokemon that would essentially be a evolution of Poliwhirl, and this would require you to do a few things. And honestly, I think something like this would be really cool, as I do think like having Pokemon that have these more like, you know, kind of like Zen feelings to them would be really sick to have, especially in Legends Arceus. I think just the vibe of the whole region like would, like, you know, fit well with this. So I don't know about your guys' thoughts on it, but I think it would be awesome. Kecleon, the color swap Pokemon, is also the lost evolution of none else, literally none else, than the man, the myth, the legend, Kecleon. And I've always wondered, what if Kecleon actually did have an evolution? Now, what if it did have an evolution back in the day within the Sinnoh region, for example, but this evolution over time, right, faded it into obscurity, right? Or essentially, it didn't require itself to actually evolve into this kind of final form, and rather just stayed in its current form, which, you know, would just be Kecleon, right? So I honestly think it would be really sick if like Kecleon was a sort of evolution for Kecleon, which just kind of was there, you know, like back in the day when it kind of needed it to survive in, like, you know, these more primal times, I guess, whereas now it's not required, so it just sticks around as a freaking Kecleon. It doesn't evolve further. So the idea of actually having a bunch of, I guess, how would you know, explain it? A bunch of pre-evolutions, a bunch of like new forms of Pokemon or brand new evolutions is honestly an idea that I do think is great, as it basically allows Game Freak to not have to like non-stop push out, you know, I'd argue they don't really need to push out a bunch of brand new Pokemon this way. They can just repurpose old Pokemon and make less of an issue out of it. And also, as I mentioned in a previous video, which you guys can check out part 1 over here, I specifically mentioned that there is this idea in my head that they could literally use this as an excuse to never bring these Pokemon back, right? They could literally include an evolution for, I don't know, let's say Kecleon, as we already talked about. And if they do include an evolution for it, they can just argue this evolution doesn't exist in the future, right? So that's why it doesn't exist in these other games. I just think it would be a really cool concept in my, you know, in my head, that they did it something like, you know, along this line. That's it. Subscribe and like for another part.